So what are the emerging roles? Well, again, it's not a single monolithic operation. IS can be thought of as multiple silos. And there are these four functions that we say are really classically ingrained within the IT organization. Running operations, that has to be done. And even if we're not doing it, we still need internal resources to manage external resources to actually run the operations, ensure the PCs are running, ensure we have mobile apps running properly, ensure the servers are going properly, any of those, the network, security, those items. Developing systems, this is where we add value to the business product that the organization is selling or interfacing with the customer. How do we create a new e-commerce system? Do we change our existing e-commerce system? Do we have a new idea, new promotions? How do we put those in, or new functionality? And develop the architecture. It looks beyond a single system and says, how does all of this integrate with each other so that we can pull data in maybe to a central data warehouse and have the right reporting structure for our executives or the marketing team or the sales team or people who need to get that information in their hands quickly. And finally, identify the business requirements. We need to make sure that we have the right resources to say this is where the business wants to go. Identify that IT is or isn't in that place, and if there's a gap, how much of a gap is it, and how do we remediate that gap? And you'll see that later on in an architecture segment that I've put in, and I think it's in Module 4. You can take a closer look at how enterprise architecture looks at that. So the squeeze on traditional IS activities, well, growing use of external services. We might hire IBM or Oracle or someone else to actually manage our services of the servers, of storage, of even networking, sometimes security, because these are somewhat commodity items. They don't give us a competitive advantage against our direct competitor. And the growing capabilities of users. Users are in more high demand, have higher demand for certain functionality. So we have to make sure that we're able to adapt quickly to that. And maybe the IS staff can handle that. If not, they have to recognize that they'll have to get additional resources to do it. So the future role of IS is acting as brokers and systems and information architecture. These are people who can put things together or basically interpret the needs and basically interpret technology to users while interpreting user functionality requirements to other technical staff. The four activities that I just mentioned basically have an impact to the organization. Things that are purely operational are around cost efficiency. Things that have high business requirements identification are focused on added value. The balance of expertise between IT knowledge and business knowledge spans from low to very high, where your computer operations people who understand database administration, Unix servers, Windows servers, those are basically high-end IT knowledge. They don't need a significant knowledge of the business, whereas things like business requirements, how does a healthcare system work, an EMR application, electronic medical records, or how does a logistics system work for shipping? That requires significant business knowledge, but it doesn't necessarily require a lot of IT knowledge. So IT has to really bridge that gap. And you see these lines of growing capabilities of users pushing back downward and to the left, whereas the growing external services are pushing over and to the right. And so you're going to see that the IT in the middle really gets squeezed. These functions that need to be done inside the IT organization, inside the IT organization specifically, are actually getting squeezed a little bit. And so you see the role of broker and systems information architecture spanning, and these ovals look a little bit different. They're a little bit more elongated as opposed to like a broader circle. And the reason for that is because they span a little bit more. They have a greater impact and require a larger amount of IT knowledge. And especially on the architecture level, you have to have the balance of both the business and the IT and the technical knowledge as well. But for an architect, someone who is an architect, you have a significant impact in the organization, both from a cost perspective as well as from a differentiation perspective. So IS has always started out as a centralized model where everything technology was focused in IS. Standards, operations, all those types of things were focused in the central IS department. But other types of IS organizations have basically dispersed certain functions, like application development. In case of social media, as a practical example, some companies don't put social media within the IT organization. They put it within the marketing function, even though it's a technical function that they may have. In some other cases where companies are very large, you may have IS subsidiaries within the subsidiaries of organizations. So there may be 15 or 16 IS departments that roll up into a central IT department, each with their own operational model. Some may outsource, some may not outsource, some may do development, some may not do development. problem with that is there may not be any centralization, there may not be any standards by which they can all adhere to. So if they need to communicate with each other and integrate with each other, it may increase the complexity of doing so. The IS department is viewed as managing three overall processes now. Driving innovation. As we need to have the organization innovate, we need the IS and technology to determine what technologies will help us meet that. Managing change. Change is the only thing that's constant in any organization. Changes can be from obviously technological and infrastructure changes to business dynamic changes, regulatory changes. Sarbanes-Oxley for financial and public companies created a significant challenge to the organization. Supporting the infrastructure is a common thing. It has to make sure that the existing infrastructure within the organization will handle the needed requirements. These are actually, you'll hear the term non-functional requirements. Can it handle 1,000 customers per second or maybe 10,000 transactions per second? Those are non-functional requirements that basically state whether our technology is meeting the business needs as stated, and the infrastructure has to support that. So this is an example of what the centralized versus federated model looks like, where everything was combined in this one super triangle, and now you see different parts of the triangle being carved out, pushed out to other areas, either other areas of the organization or even outsourced completely. So that's the first part of the IS organization. We're going to close this out, and then we're going to come back to what the CIO specifically actually does. So we'll see you shortly.